It all started with a seemingly harmless invitation. The View announced a special guest appearance that had audiences buzzing for days. Denzel Washington, one of the most respected actors in Hollywood, was set to appear live to promote his new film and discuss civic leadership in entertainment. The producers marketed it as a celebration of his career and activism, but behind the scenes, something more charged was brewing. Denzel arrived to the studio calm, collected, and sharply dressed in a charcoal gray suit. The audience gave him a standing ovation. The co-hosts beamed, at first. But Joy Behar had a different tone. Even during the welcome, she quipped, "Well, Denzel, finally gracing us with your royal presence. You've got opinions, so let's hope they're not too Hollywood today." It was meant to be playful. Denzel gave a courteous smile. But something in his eyes suggested he clocked it, and filed it away. Within the first 5 minutes, Whoopi Goldberg gave Denzel space to speak about his new film, a gripping historical drama about unsung black veterans. He spoke with passion. But Joy interrupted. "Don't you think it's dangerous," she asked, "for actors to act like moral authorities? I mean, you're not a senator, you're not a theologian, you're an actor." There was an audible shift in the room. Denzel leaned forward slightly. "I never claimed to be anything but a man who speaks from experience, Joy. And I think we've got too many folks without experience telling everyone else what to believe." Joy's smile hardened. "Are you suggesting we don't have experience?" Denzel looked directly at her. Calm. Measured. But deadly clear. "I'm saying lived experience, on the ground, in the trenches, is different than sitting behind a desk and throwing opinions like darts." The tension was thick. And that was just the beginning. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. Whoopi tried to steer things back to neutral ground, but Joy wasn't ready to let it go. "Well, Denzel, you sound like you've got a chip on your shoulder," she said, with a chuckle that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Are we not allowed to question actors anymore?" Denzel's jaw tightened slightly. "It's not about questioning," he replied calmly. "It's about respect. I came here to have a real conversation. Not to be minimized." Sonny Hostin glanced awkwardly between them, visibly uncomfortable. Ana Navarro tried to change the subject to Denzel's charity work, but Joy pressed again. "No disrespect, but you've made political comments in the past that were, let's say, interesting. Like when you said the media stirs up division. Are you calling us part of the problem?" Now the temperature in the room dropped. Denzel exhaled slowly. Then he looked Joy square in the eye. "I'm saying if you throw gasoline on a fire, don't act surprised when the house burns down. A lot of people are hurting. And some of us try to speak on that pain, while others sit here and poke holes in the message." A loud "oh" came from the audience. Joy leaned back, clearly stung. "You know, Denzel, for someone who preaches unity, you're awfully quick to point fingers." At that, Denzel stood up. "I came here to talk about real things. If this is just about sound bites and ego, I've got better ways to spend my time." The camera tried to follow him as he calmly removed his mic and walked off stage. Producers scrambled behind the scenes. Whoopi looked stunned. The audience erupted, half in shock, half in applause. Joy sat frozen, blinking fast. "Did he just walk out?" she muttered. "Oh yes. He did." The cameras cut to commercial, but the drama backstage was just heating up. Producers flooded Denzel's path, pleading with him to stay. One offered to give him the rest of the segment uninterrupted. Another begged, "We'll edit around the whole thing, just give us 5 more minutes." But Denzel was done. "I came in good faith," he said calmly, adjusting his coat. "If that's not enough, then maybe you should rethink what kind of conversations you actually want on that stage." Back on air, the show returned with a nervous Whoopi trying to smooth things over. "Well, folks, things got a little heated. We respect Mr. Washington's choice to step away. Live television, gotta love it. Joy looked visibly shaken but tried to cover it up with a smile. I didn't mean to offend him. I just think strong opinions should be challenged. Isn't that the point of the show? Sunny responded quietly but firmly. There's a difference between a challenge and a dismissal, Joy. The studio went quiet. Meanwhile, social media exploded. Within minutes, hashtags like hashtag Denzel walks out, hashtag the View meltdown, and hashtag respect Denzel were trending across platforms. Clips of the exchange were everywhere. On TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, viewers replayed the moment Denzel stood up and delivered that searing line, "If you throw gasoline on a fire, don't act surprised when the house burns down." Some called it the most powerful moment on The View in years. Others accused Joy of ambushing him. Within an hour, major outlets were reporting on it. Denzel Washington walks out of The View in live showdown with Joy Behar. Hollywood icon shuts down daytime host over media bias. And the reactions weren't slowing down. Hours later, while The View producers scrambled to manage the backlash, Denzel Washington released a short video from outside the studio. No team, no publicist, just him, holding his phone. He spoke directly and without anger. "I've got nothing against disagreement," he said. "But when people invite you to talk and then treat you like a punching bag, you have a right to get up and leave." He continued, "I came to discuss a film that honors black veterans, men who served this country and were forgotten. That's what I wanted to focus on. I wasn't there to play political ping-pong." Within minutes, the clip went viral. Celebrities weighed in. Ava DuVernay reposted it, saying, "This is what grace under fire looks like." Even Ice Cube tweeted, "Denzel did what a real one does, stand on truth and walk when it gets toxic." Meanwhile, Joy Behar stayed silent. But ABC's PR team issued a carefully worded statement: "We value open conversation and regret any discomfort caused during today's broadcast. Mr. Washington is welcome back anytime." The message was bland, but the damage was done. By evening, The View's YouTube page had over 1 million comments. Viewers flooded the network demanding an apology. Even some of Joy's usual supporters called her out for trying to publicly check a guest who outclassed the panel. But the biggest impact wasn't on the show. It was on the narrative. Denzel had shifted it. What was supposed to be a promotional interview became a national conversation about media tone, respect, and when it's time to walk away. And he didn't need to raise his voice once. By the next morning, the entire media landscape had picked it up. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all covered the moment, but each with their own spin. CNN framed it as a celebrity drawing attention to media disrespect. Fox News ran the headline, "Denzel Washington schools The View on media bias, then walks out like a boss." MSNBC took a softer angle, "Tensions flare on The View as actor Denzel Washington defends his voice." Morning shows analyzed the body language. Podcasts dissected every line. TikTok was flooded with edits, music overlays, and fan-made reenactments. But through it all, Denzel stayed quiet, until he appeared later that evening at a veterans fundraiser in D.C. On stage, he referenced the controversy just once. "I didn't walk out because I was angry," he told the crowd. "I walked out because I refused to let people make me smaller just to fit their comfort zone." Thunderous applause. Meanwhile, inside ABC, damage control was in overdrive. Sources leaked that executives were furious, not just about the walkout, but about Joy's refusal to follow pre-interview guidelines. The producers were also catching heat for not stepping in sooner. One even resigned quietly later that week. Joy Behar was noticeably absent from the next taping of The View. Officially, it was a pre-scheduled day off. Unofficially, the network needed to calm the storm. And the audience? They weren't forgetting. Memes popped up daily. Hashtags resurfaced every time someone in media tried to brush over a real conversation. But most importantly, Denzel's message about forgotten veterans was finally being heard. Documentaries got greenlit. Discussions opened nationwide. His film's trailer, buried just days earlier, surged in views and became a trending topic. He may have walked out of The View, but Denzel Washington had walked straight into the center of a bigger cultural moment. After 3 days of silence, Joy Behar returned to The View. She opened the show with a deep breath and a statement that felt more like damage control than an apology. "I want to address what happened with Denzel Washington on our last show. We've always had strong opinions at this table, and sometimes, that heat crosses a line. If Mr. Washington felt disrespected, that wasn't my intent. There was no direct apology. No real ownership." Sunny Hostin sat quietly. Whoopi glanced away. The audience gave polite applause, but social media wasn't buying it. Critics called it weak, defensive, and typical non-apology television. Some headlines read, "Joy Behar misses the moment, again Denzel took the high road, Joy took a detour." Denzel, meanwhile, continued his quiet campaign, visiting community centers, attending screenings of his film, and speaking directly to veterans. He didn't take jabs. He didn't even reference Joy's comment. But at one university QA, a student nervously asked him, "How did you stay so composed when The View got heated?" Denzel smiled gently. Composure isn't silence. It's choosing to respond in a way that serves your purpose, not someone else's agenda. That quote made it to the front page of The Hollywood Reporter. It was clear to everyone now, while some were chasing headlines, Denzel was shaping a legacy. And The View? Ratings spiked for the episode after the incident, then sharply dipped the week after. Audiences weren't just entertained by conflict. They were watching for meaning. And Denzel had delivered it, without shouting, without name-calling, just by standing up and walking away. Behind the scenes, something unexpected happened. A source close to both parties revealed that Joy Behar personally reached out to Denzel after the storm had mostly passed. Not through a publicist. Not through a producer. But directly. The call was brief. Tense at first. But sincere. "I was wrong to come at you like that," Joy reportedly said. "I let my tone override my judgment." Denzel accepted the call with grace, but he didn't sugarcoat his response. "I don't mind tough questions, Joy. I mind when people ask them with the intention to corner, not to understand." Joy listened. For once, she didn't argue. Denzel didn't ask her to go public with the apology, and he never mentioned the call afterward. But she did. On Friday's episode of The View, she offered a rare moment of clarity. "I spoke to Mr. Washington personally. He didn't ask me to share this, but I want viewers to know, I apologized. And more importantly, I listened." The audience gave her a soft round of applause. Whoopi nodded slowly, like a silent acknowledgement of progress. Sunny leaned in and added, "That's what growth looks like." But the real story wasn't about Joy. It was about how Denzel handled everything, not just the conflict, but the aftermath. No media tour. No revenge interviews. No tweets. Just quiet dignity and a laser focus on what he came to talk about, stories that matter, and people who've been silenced for too long. That weekend, his film opened to critical acclaim. One headline from the New York Times read, "Denzel's quiet storm, when walking out speaks louder than words." And in living rooms across America, one message lingered: sometimes, the strongest voice in the room is the one that knows exactly when to leave. Denzel's walkout did more than dominate headlines, it sparked a broader shift in Hollywood. Suddenly, other celebrities began speaking up about their own uncomfortable media moments. A-list names like Viola Davis, Mahershala Ali, and Regina King shared experiences where interviews became ambushes, not conversations. A viral thread on X, formerly Twitter, compiled clips of guests being cut off or cornered by talk show hosts. The most retweeted comment read, "What Denzel did wasn't dramatic. It was overdue." Studios started rethinking press tour strategies. Publicists got more selective. Some networks quietly circulated new internal memos: avoid turning segments into gotcha moments. If a guest is invited for a serious topic, treat it with respect. Even The View had to adapt. The next two guest interviews were noticeably more respectful, measured tones, careful questions, and more room for guests to speak. Viewers noticed. But Denzel wasn't interested in dragging the moment out. Instead, he used the momentum to spotlight veteran stories and underfunded mental health programs for former service members. He launched a campaign called Stand for the Forgotten, pledging funds from his film's profits to veteran-led housing programs. The campaign gained traction fast. Dozens of celebrities backed it. ABC, awkwardly enough, even offered to air a special segment on it. Denzel agreed, on one condition: no hosts. No panels. Just stories. They complied. And the result? A quiet, powerful half-hour documentary that aired on a Sunday evening and moved millions. Suddenly, the original confrontation felt like a footnote. What remained was the impact. And Joy Behar? She remained on the show. But with noticeably more restraint. In a later segment, she even joked, "Note to self, don't come for Denzel unless you're ready for a masterclass in grace." Months later, award season rolled in, and Denzel's film was front and center. It received nominations across the board: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor. But the most talked about category? Best Original Impact Campaign, a newly introduced humanitarian award given to a project that created real-world change. At the ceremony, when Denzel's name was called for the award, the crowd erupted. Not just for the film, but for the movement he had started. He walked to the stage with the same steady confidence that had defined every step since that moment on The View. As he accepted the honor, he said, "This was never about headlines or drama. It was about dignity. About how we carry our voice, even when it's challenged. And about the power of walking away when a room won't let you speak your truth." The crowd went silent, then stood in unison. It wasn't just actors and filmmakers, there were veterans in that room, advocates, community leaders. Many had flown in just to see this moment. In the front row, cameras caught someone unexpected: Joy Behar. She wasn't a presenter. She hadn't walked the red carpet. But she was there, quiet, humbled, watching from her seat. And when the standing ovation reached its peak, she joined in. Later, when reporters asked Denzel why she was invited, he simply replied, "Growth deserves a seat at the table, too." That line made headlines of its own. Because in a world built on viral outrage and cancel culture, Denzel Washington had once again chosen the higher path. Not just walking out, but knowing exactly when to welcome someone back in. By the end of the year, it was clear that Denzel moment wasn't just a cultural blip. It had become a blueprint. Universities began using clips from the View incident and Denzel's later speeches in courses on media ethics and conflict resolution. News anchors referenced it in their own on-air conversations. Podcasts, think pieces, and documentaries followed. But more importantly, a shift had started in how celebrity voices were treated, not as disposable entertainment, but as legitimate participants in national conversations. Veteran organizations reported record donations tied to Denzel's advocacy campaign. One group opened a new trauma recovery center named the Washington House, in Baltimore. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was emotional. Denzel didn't make a big show of it, he just showed up quietly, shook hands, and listened. Meanwhile, The View took on a noticeably different tone. Guests were given more space to speak. The show, once notorious for combative interviews, now leaned into deeper, more respectful discussions. Some critics called it the Denzel effect. And for Joy Behar, the experience marked a visible change. She didn't lose her edge, but she gained perspective. In later interviews, she admitted, "I mistook sharpness for strength." But real strength doesn't shout. Sometimes, it simply leaves the room. 1 year later, during a live sit-down on ABC's 2020, Denzel was asked what he hoped people remembered most. He paused. Then said, that walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. And that when someone speaks from the soul, it's our job to listen, not to win. The interviewer nodded, speechless. Because by then, everyone knew, it wasn't just a walkout. It was a turning point. Nearly a year to the day after the now legendary clash, The View made an announcement that stunned both fans and critics alike: Denzel Washington would return as a guest. The news spread like wildfire. Was it for ratings? Was it for redemption? Or something more? Producers promised a different kind of segment: no politics, no gotcha questions, just a conversation. When the day arrived, the atmosphere was electric. Every seat in the studio was filled. Security was tight. Cameras were prepped. Denzel walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. This time, he was greeted with genuine warmth. Even Joy stood, clapping, her smile softer, this time real. They sat. And for a long moment, no one spoke. Then Joy leaned in and said, "Let's try this again, the right way." The audience applauded, and Denzel smiled. What followed wasn't dramatic, it was thoughtful. Honest. Human. They discussed the film's success, the veteran centers, the conversations that had been sparked across the country. Denzel even joked, "If I knew walking off would get people listening this much, I'd have done it 10 years ago." The crowd laughed, but the message landed. Joy took the opportunity to offer something she hadn't before: a public, direct apology. "I was defensive. I didn't listen. But I've learned more in the past year from that moment than I did in the last 5. And I thank you for that." Denzel nodded. Apology accepted. And respected. That final segment wasn't about ratings or drama, it was about accountability. About growth. And as the cameras faded out, one line from Denzel closed the show: "Sometimes the biggest impact you make isn't when you say the most, but when you choose to walk away until people are ready to hear." In the months that followed Denzel's return to The View, a quiet transformation continued to ripple outward, through media, through Hollywood, and through the public consciousness. Denzel never milked the moment for fame. He never released a memoir or launched a documentary about the clash. Instead, he focused on the work. Stand for the Forgotten became one of the fastest-growing veteran advocacy campaigns in the country. Schools added units about media responsibility, and even late-night hosts began referencing the Denzel rule: speak with purpose, leave with dignity. And yet, whenever reporters asked him about it, Denzel never made himself the hero. "It wasn't about me," he'd say. "It was about the space we make, or don't make, for each other to speak truth. If walking out helped widen that space, then good. Now let's keep it open." Joy Behar remained on The View, changed but steady. That moment became a pivot point in her long career. In a later interview, she said, "I've sat across from presidents and prime ministers, but that was the first time I truly got schooled in the power of silence." On the one-year anniversary, ABC aired a short montage tribute, not to the clash, but to what followed: the veterans helped, the dialogue sparked, the humility found. The final frame faded in with no music, just one quote: "You don't have to raise your voice to raise the standard." Denzel Washington, and that became the legacy. Not a feud. Not a walkout. But a masterclass in composure. The day a man walked off a talk show, and walked the world into a better conversation.